Attention! You're about to learn a real story, a story that remained hidden for decades, an account based on rare documents, forgotten testimonies, and archives that nearly disappeared. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if you appreciate historical stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. Now, turn up the volume, turn off notifications, and come with me on this investigation. Pause. The box arrived at the National Archives on a rainy Tuesday in April of 1978. It came without fanfare or special marking, just another donation from a recently deceased naval officer's estate. The archivist logged it in, assigned it a number, and placed it on a shelf in the vast repository of American history. There it sat, unopened, for nearly 2 more years. Winter had settled over Washington, D.C. when Professor Elaine Morrison first requested access to the collection. She was researching African-American contributions to naval operations during World War II. The subject had received little academic attention. Most historians focused on the Army's segregated units or the famed Tuskegee Airmen. The Navy's black sailors were often relegated to footnotes. Mess attendants, stewards, support personnel. At least, that was the official narrative. What Professor Morrison found inside that neglected box would challenge 3 decades of written history. The first document caught her attention immediately. A worn leather logbook, its pages yellow with age, contained entries that shouldn't exist. Operation records of a specialized naval unit with mission details, convoy coordinates, and after-action reports. All signed by Lieutenant Commander Robert Jackson. All dated 1943 to 1945. All involving an all-black combat unit that, according to official Navy records, never existed. Professor Morrison checked other sources. Naval records showed Robert Jackson as a supply officer stationed at Great Lakes Naval Training Station. His personnel file indicated he never served at sea, yet here was his signature on combat reports. Here were commendations for successful operations. Here were the names of 24 black sailors who had apparently served under his command on classified night operations against Axis shipping. The contradiction was absolute and deeply troubling. The logbook's first entry was dated June 18, 1943. Written in a steady hand, it read, "Unit officially activated today under Naval Special Operations designation, November Sierra 01. Personnel transfer complete. Training commences at 2100 hours. First operational deployment scheduled for August 12. Command authorization, Admiral Wilson, Atlantic Fleet." Admiral Wilson's naval records showed no such authorization. In fact, his archived papers contained a memo explicitly opposing the use of Negro personnel in combat roles. The official history and the logbook couldn't both be true. One was wrong, or one was a deliberate falsification. Professor Morrison continued reading. The entries described specialized night operations using experimental radar and sonar equipment. The unit apparently operated from a converted fishing trawler designated only as Vessel X in the records. No naval registry from 1943 listed such a vessel. Then she found the personnel files, 24 men, each with service photographs, training records, and performance evaluations. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson's file was the thickest. A career Navy man who had served since 1937, his record showed extensive experience in navigation and small craft operations. His evaluation from Commander Jackson read, "Chief Thompson's knowledge of coastal waters and night navigation skills are unmatched in my experience. His leadership has been essential to mission success." Another file belonged to Seaman First Class William Davis from Harlem, New York, 22 years old when he joined the unit. His previous assignment, radar technician at Norfolk Naval Base. His technical aptitude scores were exceptional. A notation in his file indicated he had personally modified standard radar equipment to improve detection capabilities in rough seas. The most striking document was a typed mission report dated September 3, 1943. It detailed an operation against German supply vessels near the Azores. The report described how Vessel X approached under complete darkness, identified 3 enemy supply ships using modified radar equipment, and then coordinated with submarine forces to intercept. The operation resulted in the sinking of 2 supply vessels, carrying materials essential to the German war effort. A commendation letter followed, but with the signature block redacted. Someone had wanted to recognize their achievement, but without creating an official record. As Professor Morrison dug deeper, she found photographs. Grainy black and white images showed a group of men in naval uniforms standing on the deck of a nondescript vessel. Their faces reflected determination and pride. On the back of one photo, someone had written, "The Nighthawks, first successful operation, September 1943. The Navy had no record of any unit with that nickname. According to official histories, black sailors during World War II were restricted to support roles. They served as stewards, cooks, and ammunition handlers, not as combat operators conducting classified missions against Axis shipping. Yet the evidence in the box told a different story, a story of skilled men performing critical combat operations, a story that had been systematically erased. Professor Morrison made copies of everything. The following day, she requested access to sealed naval records from 1942 through 1945. Her request was denied. When she mentioned the logbook and Commander Jackson's unit, the archivist looked confused, then concerned. 2 days later, a Navy representative contacted her. They wanted to review her research as a matter of national security. The box was removed from the archives the following week. But by then, Professor Morrison had already begun her investigation. She would spend the next 5 years tracking down anyone who might know something about Commander Jackson's unit. Most doors closed in her face. Most phone calls went unreturned. Most official requests met bureaucratic obstacles. Then, in January of 1983, she received an anonymous letter with a Florida postmark. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address in Pensacola, and the words, "Marcus Thompson still remembers. Tuesdays are best." The small house sat 3 blocks from the ocean. Paint peeled from the window frames. A neatly trimmed lawn suggested pride of ownership despite limited means. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, now in his 70s, opened the door before Professor Morrison even knocked. He had been watching for her. "Took someone long enough," were his first words. "Come in, Professor. I've been keeping the true story for 40 years. I always knew someday someone would come asking." Pause. "Are you following so far? If this story is touching you, help us bring it to more people. A like makes a difference. A comment motivates us. A share multiplies our reach. And if you're not subscribed yet, join our community." Pause. Now, we return to the moment when everything truly began to change. The formation of the unit that would later be called the Nighthawks was never planned by the Navy's top brass. It emerged from necessity and opportunity in the spring of 1943. German U-boats were decimating Allied shipping. Convoy losses in the Atlantic had reached catastrophic levels. Conventional tactics weren't working. Desperation inspired innovation. Chief Thompson revealed the unit's true origin as he sat across from Professor Morrison in his modest living room. Naval intelligence had identified a pattern in German U-boat attacks. They primarily struck at night when visual identification was most difficult. The Navy needed a countermeasure specifically designed for nighttime operations. But available personnel were stretched thin across multiple theaters of war. "It was Lieutenant Commander Jackson who saw the opportunity," Thompson explained. He had noticed something others had missed. The Navy had a pool of highly trained black sailors who were being underutilized. Men with technical expertise, men with navigation experience, men eager to make a real contribution to the war effort. Jackson had served as a training officer at Great Lakes Naval Station. He had personally observed the capabilities of many black recruits who consistently received top marks only to be assigned to support roles. He compiled a list of names and skills. Then he approached Admiral Wilson with an unorthodox proposal: a specialized night operations unit comprised entirely of black sailors. Admiral Wilson wasn't initially receptive, Thompson continued, but Jackson had data. He had performance records, and most importantly, he had a direct connection to the convoy losses. His own brother had died when a merchant vessel was torpedoed off the coast of Nova Scotia. The Admiral authorized a 6-week trial. The operation would remain classified. If it failed, it would be quietly disbanded. If it succeeded, further missions would be considered. No promises beyond that. 24 men were selected and transferred to a secluded training facility on the Maryland coast. Their official records showed reassignment to various support positions across different naval installations. In reality, they all reported to the unmarked facility where Commander Jackson waited. "That first meeting is something I'll never forget," Thompson said, his eyes distant with memory. 24 black men in Navy uniforms standing at attention. Commander Jackson, a white officer, walked in and said something none of us had ever heard before. "Gentlemen, you've been selected for combat operations based on your exceptional abilities. You represent the best the Navy has to offer." The training was intensive, 18-hour days. Advanced radar and sonar operation, night navigation techniques, small craft handling in adverse conditions, combat first aid, communications protocols. The men lived and trained in complete isolation. Their only contact with the outside world came through Commander Jackson and the occasional supply delivery. William Davis emerged as a technical prodigy. He worked tirelessly to modify standard radar equipment for enhanced performance in the specific conditions they would face. Night operations near coastal waters required different capabilities than open ocean detection. Davis developed custom calibration techniques that improved target acquisition by 40%. Will was something special, Thompson recalled. Just 22 years old, but he understood those radar systems better than the engineers who designed them. He could close his eyes and visualize how the radio waves bounced off different surfaces. It was like he could see in the dark through that machine. Their vessel was a converted fishing trawler, 70 feet long. Wooden hull, outwardly unremarkable. Inside, it housed cutting-edge electronics and communications equipment. The engineering compartment contained modified engines capable of near-silent operation at low speeds. The deckhouse was extended to accommodate specialized radar arrays disguised as fishing equipment. After 6 weeks of training, Admiral Wilson arrived for an evaluation. He observed night maneuvers from the shore as the crew demonstrated their capabilities. The following morning, he authorized their first operational deployment with a single statement: "You have 6 weeks to prove this wasn't a mistake." On August 23, 1943, Vessel X departed from a small private dock in Chesapeake Bay. Their mission: patrol coastal shipping routes and identify German U-boat activity near Allied convoy assembly points. They would operate exclusively at night, returning to secluded harbors during daylight hours. Within the first week, they successfully tracked 2 U-boat movements and relayed positions to naval commanders. No direct confrontation occurred. The information they provided allowed for convoy routing adjustments that potentially saved hundreds of lives and thousands of tons of critical supplies. The second week brought their first direct engagement. Davis's modified radar detected an anomalous signal near a scheduled convoy route. Thompson, using darkened ship protocols, guided Vessel X to an observation position. They confirmed a German U-boat lying in wait. Rather than attacking directly, they maintained position and coordinated with a destroyer group that had been diverted to their coordinates. The resulting depth charge attack damaged the submarine severely enough to force it to surface, where it was captured along with classified communication code books. Admiral Wilson extended their operational authorization indefinitely. The unit was assigned more challenging missions. Their operational area expanded to include waters near the Azores, a critical juncture in Atlantic shipping routes. "We became like ghosts," Thompson said, "moving through darkness, appearing where we weren't expected. The modified radar gave us an advantage nobody else had. Will kept improving it with each mission. Eventually, we could detect a submarine periscope at almost twice the standard range." September brought their most significant operation. Intelligence indicated a group of German supply vessels attempting to rendezvous with U-boats in mid-Atlantic. These vessels carried fuel, torpedoes, and provisions that would allow the submarines to extend their operational range dramatically. Intercepting them would strike a serious blow to the German Atlantic campaign. Vessel X departed on September 1st with orders to locate and track the supply group. They would not engage directly, but coordinate with conventional naval forces for the actual attack. Operating in total darkness, they detected the German vessels on September 3rd. 3 ships traveling in close formation. Their radar signature matched the expected profile. "That's when things went sideways," Thompson explained. "We transmitted the coordinates and continued tracking. But a storm was moving in. Communications became unreliable. We couldn't confirm that our information had been received or that intercept forces were en route. Commander Jackson faced a decision: withdraw due to deteriorating conditions or maintain position despite the risks. They maintained position. The storm intensified. Wave heights reached 15 feet. Visibility dropped to near zero, even with night vision equipment. Then Davis detected a new radar signature. A German patrol vessel had joined the supply ships, suggesting they were nearing their rendezvous point with the U-boat Wolfpack. "Commander Jackson called us all together," Thompson said. He explained that if the supplies reached those submarines, Allied losses would be catastrophic. We needed to act, even without backup. It was the only time I saw him pause before giving an order. Their options were limited. Vessel X carried no torpedoes or heavy weapons. They had only small arms and a few depth charges intended for emergency defense. But they had something else: detailed knowledge of German naval protocols acquired through intelligence briefings. Commander Jackson proposed an audacious plan. They would approach the supply vessels using German recognition signals. In the storm and darkness, with limited visibility, they might be mistaken for the expected patrol boat. Once alongside, they would use the depth charges not against submarines, but against the supply vessels themselves. "Every man understood the risks," Thompson said quietly. "We voted unanimously to proceed." What followed was either one of the most daring naval operations of the Atlantic campaign or one of the most reckless, depending on one's perspective. Vessel X approached the German formation, signaling in proper protocol. The storm provided cover for any irregularities in their appearance. They were challenged twice by radio. Davis, who spoke fluent German, responded with appropriate codes. They were permitted to approach. Thompson guided the vessel alongside the largest supply ship. Under cover of storm noise, 3 men attached depth charges to the hull at critical points. Similar charges were deployed against a second vessel. Then Vessel X withdrew into the darkness and storm. The resulting explosions tore through both supply ships. One sank within 20 minutes. The second burned for hours before eventually sinking as well. The third supply vessel and patrol boat searched the area but found nothing in the storm-tossed seas. Vessel X was already 30 miles away, running without lights in heavy seas. "We lost 1 man," Thompson said, his voice dropping. "Samuel Reeves, washed overboard during our withdrawal. The official record lists him as drowned during a training accident near Norfolk. His family never knew the truth." When they returned to their base, Admiral Wilson was waiting. The success of their mission was undeniable. Intelligence later confirmed that the destruction of those supply vessels had significantly impaired U-boat operations in the mid-Atlantic for nearly 2 months. But the unorthodox nature of the operation raised serious concerns at higher levels. The Admiral had two messages, Thompson recalled. First, a commendation for exceptional service. Second, an order never to speak of what we'd done. Our success threatened too many established protocols, too many preconceptions about who should be fighting and how. The unit continued operations until April 1945. They conducted 17 more missions of varying scope. According to Thompson, they directly contributed to the sinking of 7 German submarines and the disruption of countless supply operations. None of it appeared in official naval records. After the war, the unit was quietly disbanded. The men were reassigned to conventional postings, mostly in support roles again. Their service records were sanitized. Vessel X was decommissioned and scrapped. Commander Jackson was transferred to administrative duties at the Pentagon, where he served until his retirement in 1962. "We were sworn to secrecy," Thompson explained. "Military orders. But more than that, we understood the times we lived in. America wasn't ready to acknowledge what we'd done, so we kept the truth among ourselves." The men of the unit maintained contact over the decades through an informal network. Christmas cards. Occasional reunions disguised as fishing trips. They watched as the military officially desegregated in 1948. They saw the civil rights movement unfold in the 1950s and 60s. They held their silence. When Commander Jackson died in 1977, he left behind the box of documents with instructions for its delivery to the National Archives. His will included a provision releasing the men of his former unit from their oath of secrecy. By then, only 14 of the original 24 were still alive. "He never forgot us," Thompson said, "and he wanted to make sure history wouldn't forget us either." Professor Morrison continued her investigation. She located 7 other surviving members of the unit. Each corroborated Thompson's account with additional details. William Davis, now working as an electronics engineer in Detroit, provided technical specifications of the modified radar system he had developed. Those specifications matched classified naval research conducted years later, suggesting Davis had been years ahead of conventional military technology. The professor compiled her research into a comprehensive report. She submitted it to the Navy Historical Division in 1984, requesting official recognition for the unit. The response was polite, but non-committal. Her findings were under review. They remained under review for 3 more years. In 1987, a new Secretary of the Navy took office. Among his initiatives was a review of historical oversights in the service record. Professor Morrison resubmitted her research. This time, it received attention. A formal investigation was launched. Naval historians were assigned to verify the accounts. Military records were unsealed for review. The investigation confirmed key elements of the story. Transfer orders placing the 24 men under Commander Jackson's authority were located in archived personnel files. Maintenance records for the converted vessel were discovered in a storage facility in Maryland. Most significantly, mission reports matching those in Jackson's logbook were found in Admiral Wilson's personal papers, which had been sealed until 1985. On June 18, 1988, exactly 45 years after the unit's formation, the Navy held a ceremony at the Pentagon. 9 surviving members of the Nighthawks received long-delayed recognition. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, now in his late 70s, accepted the Navy Unit Commendation on behalf of the group. William Davis, whose technical innovations had been crucial to their success, received the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. The ceremony received modest media coverage. A small article appeared on page 12 of the Washington Post. The evening news devoted 45 seconds to the story. For most Americans, it was a minor historical footnote about a long-concluded war. For the men who had served in that unit, it was vindication decades in the making. Professor Morrison completed her book, Nighthawks: The Secret History of America's First Integrated Naval Combat Unit, in 1990. It sold modestly, but developed a devoted following among military historians. Several questioned her findings, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial or misinterpreted. 3 separate Navy reviews confirmed her core conclusions. The most significant validation came in 2001, when previously classified German naval archives became available to researchers. Records from U-boat commanders contained multiple references to an unidentified vessel operating with unprecedented detection capabilities that had caused significant disruption to supply operations. The descriptions matched the operational profile of Vessel X. By the time these final confirmations emerged, only 3 members of the original unit remained alive. Marcus Thompson had passed away in 1996. William Davis lived until 2004, long enough to see his radar modifications officially acknowledged in naval technical histories. The last surviving member, radioman James Carter, died in 2017 at the age of 94. In his final interview, he reflected on the unit's legacy. "We didn't serve for recognition. We served because our country needed us, even if it wasn't ready to admit that need. But the truth matters. History should know what we did, not just for our sake, but for all the others who served in silence." Today, a small exhibit at the National Naval Museum includes photographs and artifacts from the Nighthawks. Their operational record is taught at the Naval Academy as an example of innovative tactical thinking. Commander Robert Jackson's leadership is studied in military history courses. What remains less examined is why their story required discovery at all. Why an operational unit with a demonstrably successful combat record was deliberately erased from official histories for decades. The answer lies in the uncomfortable truths about race in America during and after World War II. The men of the Nighthawks challenged foundational assumptions about capability, courage, and contribution. Their success contradicted narratives that justified segregation and limited opportunity. In the context of 1943, acknowledging their achievements would have required acknowledging the flaws in the very system that constrained them. The documents Commander Jackson preserved did more than record operational details. They preserved evidence of excellence that official history had no place for. They kept alive the truth of what 24 sailors accomplished in the darkness of the Atlantic when their country needed them most. Professor Morrison's research files are now part of the Smithsonian collection. The radar modifications designed by William Davis are recognized as significant innovations in military technology development. The operational tactics developed by the unit are referenced in naval warfare studies. What cannot be quantified is how many Allied ships completed their voyages because of the unit's work. How many troops arrived safely in European theaters because supply lines remained intact? How many battles turned on the presence of equipment that might otherwise have been lost to U-boat attacks? Some questions have no definitive answers. But we know this. In the darkest days of the Atlantic campaign, when German submarines threatened to sever the lifeline between America and Europe, 24 sailors went into the night. They used skill, courage, and innovation to change the course of naval warfare. They did so, knowing their contributions might never be acknowledged. They called themselves the Nighthawks. For nearly half a century, their country called them nothing at all. History has finally corrected that silence. The logbook Commander Jackson preserved concludes with a simple entry dated April 30th, 1945. Final mission completed. Unit deactivation scheduled for May 15. It has been the highest honor of my naval career to serve with these men. Whatever the official record may state, I affirm that their service was essential to our victory in the Atlantic. May a more enlightened future give them the recognition they have earned. That future was long in coming, but it arrived. Pause. End of narrative. Pause. This story, like so many others, was almost forgotten. Your support ensures that we continue to rescue these accounts. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Comment what you thought. Share with those who also appreciate real history. And explore our channel. There are more cases waiting for you. I'll meet you in the next episode.